Solar PVcast by Shift, a podcast exploring solar energy and the role it plays in improving our lives and our planet. Here's your host, Chris Palliser.
When you're looking to go solar, everyone seems to ask, what's the ROI on solar? People don't ask the ROI when they're buying an expensive vehicle or putting in a heat pump or repaving their driveway or doing perimeter drains like I had to do a couple years ago. Nobody seems to ask, what's the ROI? But when it comes to solar, they want to know, what's the ROI? Can I really live my life on solar? Is that a thing? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Joining the Solar PVcast right now is Michelle Frost, owner of Central Vancouver Island's first net zero home, to talk with us about living life with solar. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk about my house.
Yes, I get that, and I love that. How we came to be, I was chatting with a gentleman named Wally in Langley, and again, a very passionate, if there's one connection with everybody that goes solar, they're very passionate about their decision to go solar, and there's no regrets ever. We will talk about some challenges and things like that as we get into the podcast, because for sure there is some. So chatted with Wally, you reached out, you guys connected on social media. I saw you. I said, hey, Michelle, love the passion. Let's do the podcast. And here we are today.
Here we are.
So briefly, you're on Central Vancouver Island and you have a net zero home. Break it down for us. Tell us about your home and what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I'm in Port Alberni, which for most people would probably be an unlikely place to build a net zero house. I think we think of August and foggy January, and then maybe it just wouldn't work. But I have to tell you, I am 6 years in. And funny you should say, because on the screen to this side is my energy screen for the house. And I was like, am I going to make it this year? What? Am I going to get a credit back this year? And it's looking really good. So money back in my pocket again,
Yes.
6 years in a row.
6 years in a row.
Bills.
No hydro. Amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you about ROI perspective, but I know that there's money that comes back to me every year, and I don't pay anything out through the year. So life is good in net zero world.
Well, and that's the whole conversation is people are always, what's the ROI? Kind of immediate. I mean, okay, if you break the numbers down, maybe it's 10, 11, 12 years, but it is immediate. To your point, it's kind of like the house value goes up immediately. So you've made money on there, it's not cash in hand. And then of course, like you said, you kind of stop paying for power, depending what time of the year. Obviously with net metering, you build it more up in the spring and the summer and such. So that's great to hear. So tell us about the house. What's the size? And now it's net zero. So you did insulation, you did windows.
We did. Yeah. So, the house, I bought this snooky little lot in sort of downtown, my old stomping grounds in Port Alberni. So I grew up here. I lived in Victoria for 30 years. And then I decided that I found this lot and I'm like, this is a pretty cool little lot. It's super central. It had never been built on. I don't understand why. It was a really good price. I don't understand why, but we went for it. I'm pretty spoilt in that my brother owns Enterwise Homes. He's a builder. He'd been building, I'm going to call it code minimum homes for 20 years. He had retired. And he said, there's this cool thing that we could do, and it's called net zero building. And basically he pitched it to me as no hydro bills for ever. And as an accountant, I'm like, that caught my interest. And because I love the future value of money and the fact that if I retire, I have just a certain amount of fixed income. Hydro costs are variable. And I thought, isn't that cool that maybe, you wouldn't have this, $2-3 grand of hydro in your golden years. Should I still be here?
Your energy rates are locked in.
Yeah. And then my first question was, do I have to build an ugly house or can I have a nice house? And he's like, you can have any kind of house you want.
Yeah.
But I have some ideas that would make it, one, easier to build, two, that is easier to sort of tick all the boxes that we want for net zero. So, size of windows, placement of windows, how much solar on the roof. So I love this. So this was crazy. He had become our only certified net zero builder here. And he agreed to kind of come out of building retirement to do this project for me.
Amazing.
And so, yeah, we started. And where we began was I have a lot size that was an old school Port Alberni lot. So this lot is 40 by 80. It's tiny.
Okay.
My building footprint was 29 by 30.
Okay.
And I'm sure you're thinking little house, but we actually have 1,800 square feet of livable space in this house.
Amazing.
And it has everything I want. It has my office, obviously. It has a second bedroom we use as a guest room, studio kind of thing. A nice drive-through garage so that we can access the back if we need to, because we're a postage stamp little lot. All the living is on the second floor. So we've got a beautiful open concept living room, dining room, kitchen, all really modern. I'm a big fan of mid-century modern, so that's the vibe of the house. We have giant 7-foot windows, 2 of them that overlook the mountains. It has so much light. It's so beautiful. And we designed it really with sort of that aesthetic meets functionality. So we started with footprint. Then we started with the roof because we have a south-facing roof. We figured out back in the day, I think Colin designed it all for us. This is how many solar panels you can fit on this roof. And there isn't a square inch to spare. So we were able to put a 10,000 kilowatt system on top of the roof.
Or a 10,000 watt, 10 kilowatt? Yeah,
10, yeah, exactly. So then we built down. So, okay, so here's my tip. I wanted a giant master bedroom with a master bath. I wanted open concept that faced this way. I needed an office, a bedroom, a second bathroom. And we worked with a really great designer who laid everything out. And then before we went too crazy, builder reviews it to make sure that we can build what we design in a way that will meet net zero. And then we had it modeled right away. So that's a bit of the different twist when you're building net zero is you want to get your energy advisor and your builder in right at the beginning to work with the designer. So this is a team approach. It can't really be done conventionally where you just get your beautiful design done and then you see if it's going to work. So if you're really committed to net zero, you kind of have to pull your team together. And that starts with builder first because you want the certified builder. It's the only way you're going to get it done. And then he or she could probably recommend their energy auditor and the designer who understands net zero. So we did that and we went back and forth. We modeled it. We almost hit it in the model the first time. We had to make a couple different tweaks. We added an extra triple pane window here. We changed out a patio door from conventional to like the tilt and turn, European doors to get a bit more sort of air lock kind of thing on it. We switched out the hot water tank to a heat pump hot water tank, and we made a lot of these little changes and then pressed the button again. And it was like, you will meet net zero if you build this way.
Incredible.
And so that was how it started.
How fun was that process? Because I would understand, designing and doing that, all that can be stressful, but it feels like to me there's also a fun element to try to get that to zero and make all the puzzle pieces work together.
Yeah, it's like that the puzzle will work. It's like buying a 1,000-piece puzzle. You know that at the end of that puzzle there is an image there, and it's a matter of how do the pieces kind of go together.
Yeah.
So net zero is like that. There is a goal. You will achieve net zero at some point, but based on what you've got, plan, land, ideas, desires, you kind of have to have that magic of how they all come together. And, I don't think maybe net zero is for everybody, but I think it's definitely for the people who are willing to be open-minded to say, where does my design and my ideas meet this thing I want to achieve? So my goal was to achieve net zero. I was like all in. I'm like, we are getting net zero certified. There's no going back. I'm not going to be net zero ready. Like, this is the goal. And so, when it was, could you lift the front windows instead of having them literally at the floor? Could we lift them up a foot? Because that foot on the, in the summer, the overhang will catch this. And it was these little tiny insights that our builder had.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a lot to give up. There was no real big compromises. We pretty much built as designed with a few tweaks along the way. I have this ridiculous window above the kitchen sink that everybody was like, what are you doing? But I'm like, let's make it happen. And so we did. So yeah. And it's like I said, it's a lovely modern house.
Yeah.
We don't want for anything here.
It's wonderful because there's a lot of people that you're right. As we move along this adoption curve, there's a lot of people that still think, solar panels, that's like the person with the tinfoil hat that lives up on the mountain, right?
No kidding,
but no, like here you are living, breathing. You've got a beautiful home by the sounds of it. You're living a quote normal life. You know, when it's cold, you put your heat on, maybe you leave a light on or two. You
don't even touch it. Honestly, we've got 2 ductless splits, one up and down. I change them twice a year. In the summer, I just flip them to cool. Yeah. When it hits this temperature, just cool it down. And in the winter, I just say heat it. When it hits, this temperature, keep it up.
Keep it there.
It's like a set it and forget it, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's so comfortable.
LED lights and insulation. What type of insulation?
We have a lot of okay, this is interesting. So our house is built with SIP walls. So they're the structured insulated panels. Okay. And imagine 2 sheets of like OSB with the foam core sandwiched between 6-8 inches of foam.
Okay.
So as part of our design process, we built and designed the entire house, and then we sent that to the SIP folks, and they basically our house arrived on a big truck, and it went up like Lego kind of thing.
Oh,
so it was a very fast build. And like perfectly built. So we don't have any of those thermal breaks that conventional timber construction, et cetera, will have. And the tech is even getting better. I don't know if I can probably tell you this, but I'm going to say it anyway, because my brother who owns Enterwise is absolutely brilliant. And they've actually just patented a whole new stud technology to build energy efficient homes.
Incredible.
So they're just building their first homes with that. And I'm like, I love this incremental things just get better and better and better as solar panels get more powerful. It's just like the building technology even gets better and better. So,
and you're bang on. There's so much research and development because more and more of this is happening. It's becoming mainstream and not only because financially now it makes a lot of sense, but it's meeting the middle of aesthetically pleasing, financially, all these things at helping the environment. They're all meeting in the middle, and you're winning. You're an example of that. And it's
I love it.
It's wonderful to hear about all those little things that it kind of makes you feel guilty, like, living in a house that hasn't had this stuff thought about. Because you're right. Like I spoke with one family, and in the winter when the sun's low, you want the windows here because then the sun will come in here. However, in the summer when you want it cool, like you said, you make the eaves a little longer, and that's gonna, just like you mentioned with that 1-foot window. There's so much.
That's your brilliant team, right? So it's the ones who can think it and visualize what they're building through the process.
Yeah.
And say, all right, so if we took the, even though our footprint is 2930, we were allowed to go at another foot on the second floor. So our top floor cantilevers out about a foot. Well, it's more square footage, but it also does a lot to break the summer south-facing Port Alberni Valley sun pattern.
There you go.
And it just tweaks it that little bit extra, right? The way we have our deck and the shaded big windows and stuff, or the minimizing the north-facing windows, right? Because of all the coolness. It's the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
And it's, like I said, it's a bit of a different build process because we're so used to just going right to the architect and say, I want this amazing house. But if you can't build that to meet a net zero goal, then you've just wasted a lot of time and money. So I'd almost say always start with picking your builder first, who's certified, because they just know all the little things. Like, I went back and forth on, I wanted drywall returns. I didn't want molding. I want it clean and sleek. And it's like, okay, great. Then we need to do this, this, and this. And so it was really insightful for me. And I know some people will say, but Michelle, your brother built it. And I'm like, okay, he spared me like I was the experiment and the guinea pig. So like, there was no love lost between my brother and
totally.
Like, it was still very, this is what you need to do. This is why you need to do it. And sometimes I needed to go away and sit with it, and then figure out what was most important to me. So again, I wanted to tick that box on,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to achieve net zero. And
Yeah.
had I do it all over again, I'm all in. I already have another house designed in my head, ready to go. So I thought this might be my forever house, but it clearly won't be. So, I'm ready. I'm
you
like,
can hear the
I have a
passion
house
and
in my head, net
yeah.
zero. I don't know why anybody would do a code minimum house.
Yeah.
Fun fact, like my house it will be the how do I articulate this? Our BC building code has minimum like building standards.
Okay.
So this house will be the minimum build for the year 2032. We built it in 2019. So we were like 13 years ahead of what's coming.
Yeah.
So people won't have a choice, and it's going to be fantastic.
Well, this is exactly to your point about getting the team involved early. And I love how you started with the footprint and then you went right to the roof, because
the roof.
If you're using solar, we got to figure out what this roof needs to look like before we do anything else.
Yeah.
And there's right now they're building houses and they're checking them off as solar ready, but it's like a north facing slope, or there's plumbing stacks, or they put skylights where the solar would need to be in.
Yeah,
or they
or
run
a services stack for your cable or your something
opposite from the electrical panel. And you're just like,
and then it's like, well, that's great that it's solar ready, but did you happen to talk to the solar guys to see what that means, right? Because it's more than just adding your solar array. It's like if they've got to work around a lot of poorly designed features, then it might be solar ready, but that's when you talk about ROI. And I love the ROI conversation is interesting because it doesn't come into account when you're building net zero, because you're not building a conventional home and then adding solar.
Right.
It is the sum of the parts. It is part of the build. Yeah. It's kind of a non-negotiable. So it's just the cost of the building. And I'm not looking for an ROI on my solar because I already have it sort of from day one, because it's factored into the cost of construction. And I'm winning, like, you know, especially if you build and you light your system up in like April, like you're winning year one. So, it's different. I can see where the ROI is definitely, you have a house that you maybe want to reduce hydro bills. You want to be, more energy efficient, and you're going to add to it. What's the ROI? What's the payback? How many years? Valid question.
Yeah.
But I think it's only one part of the question.
Well,
kind of thing. Yeah.
And kind of I alluded to in my opening is that for sure it's a question. Everyone wants to know their ROI, but it's kind of renting and owning. It's like, is it better to own a home or rent a home in the long term? And it's the same thing for power. Is it better to rent your power and pay whatever the landlord, in this case Hydro, is charging, or is it better to own your power? So the ROI is, in my mind, day one, you're good. You're locked in, especially like you said in April. What are some of the challenges that came with this? Were your friends on board? Were there people be like, are you sure, Michelle? I don't know.
Well, the good part when you leave, where you've lived for 30 years is that you've got a clean slate to kind of come back to. The other challenge is all my family's here. So they were great because they, listen, in my family, the question is really, what is she doing and what is she up to? I've just been always that kid. So it was never a surprise to somebody that I was doing this. And I guess because it was just so natural and it just flowed, and I had just made my mind up that I was building this house, it actually was really quite easy, right? When you're into it, you're not twisting any arms. This is just something you want to do. So I didn't struggle with any of that. What would I say? I think sometimes it's the little things. It's living in the house now. Like, I would have made that window bigger. Like, it was the small things, like when you get a triple pane window, there's a lot more edging, like white edging around the inside of the window. So when you see an opening that's this big, your glass window is actually about this big. So it's these little things, or visualizing layout as to where things go and furniture goes. And then I'd made some decisions, on the way, like we got rid of all of our, like the walk-through closets and things. And I'm like, I'd rather just have a floor to ceiling wardrobe that just keeps the room really open. So I would say, if anything, it was more the aesthetic and the design as we went, and my ability to visualize what that kind of looked like and meant. We also gained a ton of space because our roof has got quite a slope. It's like an 812 slope. So it kind of goes like this. And imagine the main floor like this. So we had this space, which was deemed like attic. And I didn't appreciate how much space was there until it was all kind of framed in. And, of course, we didn't use trusses for the roof. We used the SIP wall. So it's all wide open space. So we gained all this extra space. And then we sort of made some creative choices to be able to access that space. So I would say, really just be open to kind of going with the flow a little bit. I think that goes for any home build. If you're really rigid, it's probably going to be more problematic for you. But if you're just open-minded, you got your eye on the goal, and you're kind of willing to give and take a little bit, I think that would probably be the best recommendation I could give anybody for building anything. But
have you had to make any sacrifices? Because I'm sure there's people out there like, well, I can't live my regular life if I do this fancy environmental home. Have you made sacrifices, or have you been able to just continue on?
I don't feel I've made any sacrifices. I think I've gained on all fronts. So I come from Victoria. I had a 1952 beautiful little Victoria bungalow that was drafty and cold, and even coming into a code minimum house that's not well sealed or ventilated. It's just my experience of all the homes that I've had. It's like a treat. It's like a set it and forget it. It is beautiful. It is modern. It is comfortable. I don't overthink my usage of hydro. Like, I got to turn that off or turn this on. I was just looking at numbers because our account reconciles March 1st. And I'm like, I think I'm going to have like 1,500 kilowatts credit in my account that they'll basically, credit my account for.
Yeah, brilliant.
Cash wise. So I'm like, I love that. Right. So I don't skimp and save, or try to be mindful, or I'm not obsessive about my power and energy. In the summer, we keep it cool. It can get really hot in Port Alberni. I don't try to leave it at, 28 degrees in order to save some AC, where we put it down. It's warm in the summer.
You're just living your life.
Just living my life. And then the builder's idea. So in Victoria at that time, in the sort of mid 2010s, I guess, the style of home that they were building there was really quite modern. It was metal roofing on the sides of houses and lots of like glass railings. The black had come in. The hardy panel sheets, like the panels, not the board, was really thick. So they had a really cool look and feel. And that's what I wanted to build here. And you would have thought going into all of our local builders that I was insane, because I'm looking for a dark gray corrugated metal that I can put as siding, but metal goes on the roof. And I'm like, no, I get that, but I want to use it on the side. And so it took a bit, same with the hardy panel and how the bump out and how I wanted it. And I would sit there on my iPad and draw these drawings that look like a 5-year-old did it for the colors and how I wanted things. And they just kind of nodded and they're like, yeah, that's fine. We're going to put anything on the thing. But what I loved about that is it's super low maintenance. Right. We paint the trim every 2 or 3 years. And that to me is amazing. So I think about, how am I going to live in this house 10, 15 years from now if I stay here? And it's I don't want the massive garden. So the front is all xeriscape. There's a small patch of grass out back. All the siding just needs to be hosed down. There's no painting involved on the siding. The upkeep is
the
so
panels,
minimal.
the rain takes care of the
panels. It
panels.
snows twice a year and it clears off my solar panels.
Yeah, beauty.
Right? So it's that actually was a surprising thing with some of those recommendations on the exterior, and that of taking the builders functional recommendations and then blending them with my own personal aesthetic.
But it's great that there was a happy medium. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and again,
exactly.
there's still
and then
myths
the energy
out there.
modeler was amazing. She came a few times and we just killed it. Each test was just she's amazing. And then, we just went back at it and fine tuned some little things. We had to put some extra insulation between the downstairs main wall and the garage, because the garage is framed. because it's always open. So there's no sense in trying to make that airtight when
Right.
you've got two big garage doors. So it was the little tweaks as we built, and then the testing. So it's like it's iterative, right? It's agile. It's not like, here's the design, I'll see you in 6 months, we're done. It's
Right.
like, here's the design, we do part one, what do you think? And then it's like this dance, right?
Yeah.
And you've got partners
Yeah.
versus, you just pay some money and you show up.
Yeah. And that really is
Yeah.
what we'd all want if we're building our home, is that you want a team that's going to be with you right through it, right?
For sure. Yeah.
So that's great. Do you find it's contagious? I mean, just listening to you, I'm thinking right now of bulldozing my 1961 Victoria home and doing it. Not that
Do
I
it.
can, but I'm just like,
Don't bulldoze it. Just call Nickel Brothers. We
Okay.
have another property, and I have to tell you this. It has a beautiful 1914 heritage home on front of it, and I use that as my studio. And it's not my vibe at all. And I keep saying to my husband, we could just get Nickel Brothers to come and just lift up this house and just take it away, and then let's do another net zero house on it. He's
There you
like,
go.
okay, great,
yeah, sounds good.
whatever
But
you like.
do you find in your conversations with people, like they leave there thinking like, has anyone reached out to you 6 months after chatting with you and been like, okay, we're going to do it, give me some help?
It's really funny because my house is typically the first stop of anybody that wants to build net zero, because it's you can see it coming in, like, that this is my house. I just say I'm the really tall house with the solar and the bright colored like chartreuse door, and they're like, I know your house. I think it's still a really slow adoption.
Yeah.
I think people there's still a bit. Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's like a little bit of like, tinfoil hats and a little bit of woo woo. Like if you say net zero, energy efficient, they all kind of go, like, okay, I'm going to have to give something up, or it's going to be really expensive.
100%.
And I think that stops people.
Yeah.
And, my encouragement would be, just talk it out.
Yeah.
Just go and research and ask a few people, find a builder, have a conversation.
Somehow we went away
okay.
from that, because it's like 200 years ago we were building with what we had. Of course, the insulation wasn't great, but you worked with the environment. And then we just went to the matchstick homes, and this is how it's done, and everyone bought into it, whether it's great marketing by big oil or who knows.
Yeah, or
And so
the billion-dollar construction companies. And we got away from, spec home became, the customization became, what countertops and wood color do you want on your floor?
Totally.
And it's sort of like, I get it, right? So volume, I'm a builder, I can do 1, 2, 3, 4 in sequence. The prices get better. But I'm like, I lean in now to, I think we're coming back around. And, I have friends who do beautiful rammed earth houses out of Salt Spring, and they travel the world doing these houses. And I think people still see them as like, well, it's like you're building like from like mud, right? Like they're not quite open-minded. And, I'm hoping that with conversations around, here's, fun fact that people don't know about the energy efficient homes is like or a net zero is you're like one step away from making that like a resilient home. So we look at all of our wildfires and what's just been tragic in California. And, my net zero house is literally built to a standard which is way more resilient from fire and things like that than a traditional home. So yes, I have metal siding, which is going to act as a barrier. But had I known at the time, or had it been a conversation that another couple inches of an insulation on the outside of my house would have like increased that resiliency on fire, like, a tenfold, I would have been like all in.
Right.
Because, we're
a resilient home. I haven't even heard that term.
What's that?
Go from, minimal to net zero. Now we're going the other way. We're going to resilient homes.
Resilient homes. And I take no credit for that. Again, that's Doug. That's my brother. And he's very forward thinking. So he's like, we should be talking about this. We live in British Columbia. We've seen, the devastation of like towns, and we think it's not going to happen to us. Mm-hmm. But we are in Port Alberni, and like the temperature of the valley, the forest that we have here, the forest practices changing where they're not cleaning up the forest floors anymore. Like there's so much that's happened over the last 20 years that makes it, it's just like tick, tick when something really significant might happen here. And, if you're going to build something anyway, and you want to build, why would you not want to just see how far you can take it within whatever budget you have? Like, how far can I go?
Totally. I mean, it's insurance. We all, whether you agree with insurance or not, we all pay for insurance. Why wouldn't you do that with your home? You're the biggest investment you're probably going to make in your life, right?
Yeah. And nowadays, when I did this house, nobody knew about net zero. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a thing yet. It was just coming up on the step code for CH or the home builders and BC building code. There were no grants. There were no incentives. The local building inspector didn't really quite know what we were doing yet. Like it was right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So now you've got greener homes loan. You've got all these cool things that you can tap into to help buffer some of those costs, mm-hmm. right? So, I would just really encourage people, like, be open-minded, be curious as to what you could do. And if you can't get all the way there, isn't it better to get partway there than not even explore it at all?
Totally. Yeah, and we're in this wild time right now with our neighbors to the south. Resiliency and self-sufficiency is massive, so it takes a team to do that. So teamwork makes the dream work no matter what. Yeah. But wonderful. Any more fun facts? You've shared a great few fun facts.
What else did we do? We did some cool stuff while we built. My favorite is the heat recovery unit. This is something super cool. We have this 5-foot copper stack in the wall downstairs. And it recaptures all the heat from all of our wastewater. So our showers,
amazing,
our dishwasher, whatever is flowing down.
Yeah.
It takes all that heat energy that we've already paid to heat up all the hot water.
Right.
And it basically has this massive coil around it that the cold water that comes in from the city gets preheated as it comes into the house. So that made actually quite a difference on our
gray
energy
water
modeling.
Incredible.
And it was like I don't know, it was like $500 at the time.
Right.
These were not big things.
Yeah.
And I think they're just kind of really cool stuff.
Yeah.
So little stuff like that, and I don't feel like I sacrificed. We put a really nice, fun, modern kitchen in, open concept and it's a beautiful house in the sense that we have quite an art collection. So it was the first time the painter had actually been requested to use the same paint and paint everything in the same color, like white on white on white on white.
Right, the whole place.
And he thought I was crazy, but when he saw it all come together, he's like, "That's brilliant." And now he'll even say to me, I've had I showed that house to a lot of people, and there's so many of my clients that are doing it now. So just keeping the spirit of the house, the light, the brightness.
Yeah. It feels light on so many levels. Physically from light. It's powered by light. It's open, light and airy. You know what I mean? It sounds like you really nailed it.
Well, next time you're in Port Alberni, you'll have to come visit.
100%. Yeah, actually, our main sponsor, Shift, the owner is from Port Alberni. Yep. Do you know the Strong family?
I do. They did our roof. They're my solar guys.
I missed that one. I totally missed that one.
Oh, no, it's your guys.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, and they were listen, it was one where, Dan was still kind of helping and doing it all day to day. And you were still outsourcing electricians and building your own company.
When it was small,
7 years ago. So you guys have come a long way.
Yeah, no, Shift now is across Canada, in provinces across Canada, and all in-house team now, and no, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, so you got the behemoth of the big slope roof.
Yeah, amazing. I love that.
Yeah, you know what? That will be one other thing I would say is that think about the future of how something is going to be maintained.
Yeah.
Especially your solar, because that for some people, depending on where it lives. So in Port Alberni, for example, we have a lot of really tall trees and things. So, if solar panels are going on, are they going to be cleared? Or is anything going to pile up underneath them? And I know a lot of people do retrofits of existing houses, and it's always funny to see solar going on like older roofs. And I know that like any probably great installer would advise against that.
100%.
But it's when people just do things spontaneously and they don't really do the research, or maybe they don't have the best team helping them out. Just things to think about is like put yourself 5 years out and something happens with, something goes wrong and I've got to pull a panel and stuff. Like
right.
How are we going to get there? How are we going to access it?
Yeah.
We've been lucky. Our system has been like completely solid. I think we had one little kind of thing that needed to be swapped out and it was not a big deal. So
beauty. And that's the team, right? That's like you said, it's putting that effort in at the beginning. Yeah. My gosh, it makes such a difference. And I think you've got a job as a consultant here for anyone going net zero. Contact Michelle.
Yeah. You know what? That would be a fun gig, honestly. Yeah. Could I would love
great
that.
Energy. I think it would be amazing if in my day ever comes, I'm 100% bringing you in.
Awesome. Well, you know what? I think it's really important because I don't see a lot of owners talking about net zero. The conversations always come from more of one of the, like the solar or the builder or, home builders association. They're always from the supplier side. And I'm like, okay, but who's the advocate for the homeowner? Like, like how do your builder can tell you all day long how amazing it is to build a net zero home. But I'm always like, I would just much rather hear that from the person who built the house and lives in the house. Yeah. And is it all, all that in a bag of chips, right? So,
well, that's what this conversation was, to hear from the owner, to hear from the person living in the house and what that living with solar, living with net zero life is like. And it sounds pretty fantastic, freaking amazing.
Do it. Yes. At least be open to it and have the conversations and be curious about if it's an option for you. It may not be, it may not work out, but at least you can say you explored it. Yeah. And you can actually check the boxes on yeses or nos and then come to a decision versus just dismissing it because of a perception that it's hard or it's expensive or you're not going to get the kind of home you want. Like,
and
that's my biggest encouragement.
Totally. And work towards it. Maybe right now where you're living, it's not going to work. But to your point, make it a plan, put it on the vision board, whatever you want to do. And maybe 5 years when you're going to buy the next house, you'll have that in mind. Or when you're looking for a piece of land, you'll have that in mind. And that's just the beginning.
Or here's the crazy thing. You could still decide to build the house and you could still do it with a net zero builder. You might not be able to get to net zero the first crack, but I guarantee you will exceed anything that you had hoped to build with a code minimum builder who's just going to build the house. Right. So I hear stories all the time, whereas I wasn't going for net zero. I was happy with like step code 4, but through a few tweaks and recommendation, my builder got me to step code 5, and now I'm net zero ready. And I had no idea that that was even possible. Right. But as they built, they were able to be in it and see it and offer some suggestions that cost me no more money or very minimal. And I'm now way ahead of the game so that when I do want to throw the solar array on the roof, like it's plug and play.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's still
legit
benefit.
Solar ready and
so there's still benefits to talking to those types of professionals. Even if you decide to build not at that level, you can still have the expertise that might get you farther than you otherwise would get. So it's encouraging.
It's very encouraging. It's exciting. And your passion is flowing through this video podcast and audio podcast if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music.
Awesome.
Michelle Frost, Central Vancouver Island's first net zero home, Port Alberni. Thank you so much for joining the podcast and sharing your experience. We got to get you back on for the next build.
You're so welcome. I'll talk about this all day long.
The next build, right? The next build. We're going to get you on.
Next build. Oh, it's a beauty. It's a mid-century modern inspired house.
Okay.
With a full shop, place for my husband to have his cars.
Yeah.
Courtyard, slope roofs. Yeah.
And net zero.
We just got to find the property. So always net zero.
Yeah.
Never anything else.
Resilient next.
Resilient next year. Yeah, let's explore that more. I think that's something to explore.
Beautiful. Michelle, thank you.
You are so welcome. Thanks, Chris.
The Solar PVcast by Shift with Chris Palliser. To begin your solar journey, visit shift.ca.